I always thought love was simple. That it was built on shared moments, routine, and the quiet companionship of someone who understood you. My husband and I had that, years of living side by side, building a life together, making memories, dreaming of the future. In the early years, everything felt so effortless. The way we laughed together, the small, quiet moments of comfort that spoke more than words ever could. It was the kind of love that felt like a steady, unwavering presence, reliable, warm, predictable. But over time, that steady warmth began to fade into something else. It wasn't that I stopped loving him, I didn't. How could I? He was the person I had chosen, the person I had built a life with. But somewhere along the way, I began to feel lost. It was subtle at first, just a quiet ache that I couldn't name. The stillness of our home began to press on me. We were there, physically present, but emotionally distant. The connection I once felt with him seemed to slip away, unnoticed, like water leaking through cracks in a wall. We still talked, of course. We still shared meals, plans, and our daily routines. But it all felt like it was happening at a distance. The conversations were polite, perhaps even loving in their own way, but they lacked the depth I once felt between us. He was there, but not with me. And I began to feel the absence of something I couldn't quite explain. At first, I told myself it was just a phase, something everyone goes through at some point. That the quiet times were just part of life settling into its rhythm. But the longer this quiet drift went on, the harder it became to ignore. There were no big fights, no major events that caused it. It was the silence that spoke loudest, the small things that slowly grew larger. And though we never said it out loud, I could feel the gap between us widening. I began to notice the way he moved through the house, the way he seemed lost in his own thoughts, and I realized that I wasn't the only one feeling the distance. But unlike me, he didn't seem to see it, or, if he did, he didn't know how to address it. It wasn't that we were unhappy, far from it. But something had shifted, and neither of us knew how to reach across it. Then, one day, I realized that I was looking for something else. Something I wasn't even sure I wanted to admit to myself. It started small, just an occasional glance at a stranger, a brief moment where someone else's words seemed to linger in my mind longer than my husband's had. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt him. I didn't. But I was suddenly aware of how unseen I had begun to feel. The days bled together, one indistinguishable from the next. I longed for something more, something that would make me feel alive again, something to remind me that I mattered beyond the duties of wife, daughter, and friend. But how could I admit that to myself? How could I face the truth that, while my life with him had been comfortable and secure, it no longer felt like enough? I didn't know then, but I would soon find out. I would soon find myself doing things I thought I would never do, feeling things I never imagined would become a part of me. The quiet loneliness of my thoughts began to grow louder, and I would find myself drifting further away from the one person I thought I could always count on. As the days passed, I tried to ignore the feelings that were quietly stirring inside me. I kept telling myself that it was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal if I tried harder, if I paid more attention to him, to us. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more I felt like I was living in a fog, unable to see clearly. The silence between us grew heavier, and I began to wonder if this was what the rest of our lives would look like. Then, one evening, I met someone. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. We were introduced casually, at a friend's gathering, nothing special, just another face in a crowd. But something in the way he spoke to me caught my attention. There was a curiosity in his eyes, an interest that made me feel seen. In those brief moments, when our eyes met and our words flowed easily, I felt a spark, a fleeting reminder of something I hadn't realized I was missing. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was just overreacting, that it was just the excitement of someone paying attention to me again. But deep down, I knew it was more. Over the next few weeks, I found myself looking forward to seeing him. At first, it was innocent, just casual exchanges of conversation, nothing more than small talk. But with each interaction, I began to feel a connection that I hadn't realized was possible. He made me laugh in ways I hadn't laughed in years. He listened to me, really listened, as though my thoughts and words mattered. I began to feel important again, as though I was more than just the role of wife, mother, friend. I felt like I was me again, the woman I had long forgotten. The more I engaged with him, the more I began to lose sight of what was real. It wasn't just the attention I was seeking, it was the way he made me feel alive, something I hadn't realized I was missing in my marriage. It was a gentle pull, an invisible thread that began to tie me to him in ways I couldn't fully explain. The distance between me and my husband grew even more pronounced. The quiet moments I used to cherish with him now felt like a weight, a reminder of the emptiness I had started to feel. I told myself it was harmless. That it was just a distraction from the monotony, from the loneliness that had settled in. But deep down, I knew I was walking a dangerous path. I was slipping away from the person I used to be, the woman I had always prided myself on being. I was no longer just the wife, I was someone else, someone I didn't even recognize anymore. And yet, I kept going. The conversations with him became longer, more intimate. Each moment we spent together made me feel more and more disconnected from my husband. I tried to convince myself that it didn't mean anything, that I could stop before it went too far. But I couldn't seem to stop the pull. It was like something inside me had woken up, something I didn't know I had been longing for. I began to lie. Small lies, insignificant at first, but they piled up over time. I told my husband I was going to run errands when I was actually meeting him. I told him I was working late when I was lost in conversation with someone else. And with each lie, the distance between me and my husband grew. The guilt I felt weighed heavily on my chest, but I couldn't seem to stop. I was caught in something I didn't know how to get out of. The truth, however, was becoming harder to hide. As the days went by, I could feel myself changing. I tried to act normal around my husband, to maintain the facade of the life we had built together. But inside, I was unraveling. Each lie, each secret, weighed heavier on my soul. I started to dread coming home, not because I didn't love him, but because I knew the truth was eating away at me. Every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had given me everything, the man who trusted me, and yet, I was betraying him in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. The quiet between us became unbearable. The more I distanced myself emotionally, the more he seemed to reach out, to try to bring us back together. I saw it in the small things, the way he asked how my day had been, the gentle touch on my arm when we sat together on the couch. But I couldn't be there with him anymore. Not truly. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. The guilt twisted inside me, but I couldn't seem to stop the cycle I had started. He never suspected a thing. He never saw the signs, never questioned my late nights or my distracted demeanor. Part of me was relieved by that, part of me was thankful that he didn't know. But another part of me, deep down, wanted him to notice. I wanted him to see the distance between us, the way I had become someone else, someone I didn't recognize. But he didn't. One evening, after a particularly long day of pretending, I found myself sitting alone in the dark, just staring at the wall. I was numb, exhausted by the emotional toll of it all. The lies had become too much to bear, the secrecy too suffocating. My thoughts were a whirlwind of guilt and fear. What had I become? How could I have let it go this far? I thought about him, the man I had betrayed. The one who had been my partner, my best friend. The one who had loved me with such quiet devotion, who had always been there, in good times and bad. I could still remember the way he looked at me when we first met, the spark in his eyes, the way he saw something in me that I had never seen in myself. I used to be that woman, the one who believed in love, who cherished the connection I had with him. How had I let this happen? I couldn't deny it anymore. I had to face the truth, even if it meant losing everything. The emotional affair had become something I couldn't ignore, something that had taken root inside me in a way I hadn't expected. The more I denied it, the worse the guilt became. And the more I tried to hide it, the more I realized that I was losing not just my husband but myself as well. That night, I knew what I had to do. The lies couldn't go on. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I had to confess. It was the only way to face what I had done and to stop running from the consequences of my actions. I had no idea how he would react. Would he be angry? Would he hate me? Or worse, would he leave me? But the longer I put it off, the more I realized that the truth was the only thing that could set me free. I had to own my mistakes, no matter the cost. And so, as the weight of the secret pressed down on me, I knew I couldn't carry it anymore. The next morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, as he did every day. The normalcy of the moment felt like a cruel reminder of how far I had fallen. I stood there for a moment, looking at him, trying to find the courage to speak. But the words felt like they were caught in my throat. How could I tell him everything? How could I explain what I had done? "I need to talk to you," I finally said, my voice shaky. He looked up at me, his brow furrowing with concern. "What's wrong?" I hesitated for a moment, the fear of his reaction washing over me. But then I took a deep breath, and I spoke. "I've been unfaithful," I whispered, my heart racing. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. I had never been more terrified in my life. I had no idea what he would say, no idea how he would react. All I knew was that I had to tell him the truth. I didn't know what I expected, but the silence that followed my confession was the heaviest thing I had ever felt. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he just stared at me, as though trying to process what I had just said. His hand, which had been resting on the coffee mug, now hung limply by his side, the quiet stillness of the moment stretching between us like a vast chasm. I braced myself for the storm. I had prepared myself for anger, for shouting, for the unbearable sound of him walking out the door. I had already rehearsed the apologies, the explanations, but nothing seemed adequate. How could I explain something that felt so complicated, so full of regret? How could I explain the emptiness I had felt, the loneliness that had crept in like a thief, taking pieces of me that I hadn't even realized were gone? But he didn't say anything. He didn't yell. He didn't even cry. He just looked at me with a kind of sadness in his eyes that broke me more than any outburst could have. His silence was so loud, so painful, that I couldn't bear to meet his gaze. "I don't know why you did it," he said quietly, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what happened, but..." He stopped, running a hand through his hair as though trying to gather his thoughts. "But I can't just give up on us." I felt my heart stop. There was no anger in his words. No hatred. Just pain. So much pain that it was almost suffocating. He was looking at me, not with the fury I had expected, but with a kind of quiet devastation, as though he could see the pieces of our life crumbling, and yet, he wasn't willing to let them go without trying to rebuild. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know if I should apologize again, or if I should just let him speak. He looked at me, his expression both tender and broken, and for the first time in a long while, I saw him, really saw him. The man who had stood by me through everything, who had given me everything. And I had betrayed him. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But I can't just throw everything away. Not yet." He paused, and then, with a deep sigh, he added, "We'll figure this out. But we're going to have to rebuild, step by step. You'll have to prove that you're willing to work for it, and I'm going to have to believe you again." The weight that lifted from my chest in that moment was impossible to describe. He was willing to stay. He was willing to fight for us, even though I had torn it all apart. "I'll do anything," I whispered, my voice barely audible, the tears finally coming. "I'll spend every day proving to you that I can be the woman you deserve. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I will work for it, every single day." He nodded, his face softening, though the sadness still lingered in his eyes. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to try," he said. "But we have to be honest. We have to talk about everything, the things that led to this. And we have to rebuild trust. I'm not asking for miracles, but I'm not walking away yet. We still have something." I sat there, shaking, my heart aching for the trust one had broken, but at the same time, a flicker of hope was born. He was giving me a chance. A chance to fix what I had destroyed. A chance to show him that I could be the person he thought I was. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. We had a long road ahead of us, and the scars of betrayal would never fully fade. But in that moment, as we sat there, quietly together, I realized that love, though fragile, could endure if both people were willing to fight for it. And I was willing to fight. For him. For us. For the life we had built together. We didn't pretend like nothing had happened. There was no magic moment where everything was fixed. But with every word we spoke, with every tear we shed, we started to rebuild. Slowly. Carefully. We didn't know where the road would lead, but we were taking it together, one step at a time. And for the first time in a long while, I believed in the possibility of forgiveness. I believed that we could find our way back to each other. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least, we had each other. And that, in itself, was enough. And if you're reading this, maybe you're feeling something similar to what I felt, a weight, a quiet ache that you can't ignore anymore. Let me tell you, I know what it's like to drift in a relationship, to feel a yearning for something more, even when you're not sure what exactly it is. I know what it's like to feel disconnected from someone you love deeply, and yet, in that emptiness, find yourself doing things you never imagined you would. It's a slow descent, and it can be terrifying when you realize you've crossed a line you can't come back from. When I look back at it now, it's hard not to blame myself. How could I have let this happen? I loved him. But in the quiet spaces, I became lost, too busy blaming the world, the routines, the expectations, to see that I was the one who had changed. I started seeking attention, and soon, I convinced myself it was harmless. The small conversations that gave me a little spark, the moments where I felt seen again, it was like a drug. And each time I felt that connection, it pulled me further away from the life I had built with him. But I want to tell you something important: you can't lie to yourself forever. You can't keep running from the truth, no matter how much it hurts. I didn't think I could confess, because I feared what would happen, what I might lose. But you need to understand that carrying the weight of your mistakes doesn't just hurt the person you've betrayed, it destroys you, too. The truth may not set you free immediately, but it will give you the chance to fix what's broken. The day I confessed, I was shaking, terrified of what would come next. I had already prepared myself for his anger, his disappointment, for him to walk away. But instead, he looked at me with sadness, not rage. He didn't forgive me right away, but he chose to stay. And that was the first step. I couldn't believe it, but in that moment, I knew it wasn't the end. It was a beginning. If you're in this place, maybe you're the one who's been unfaithful, or maybe you're the one who's been hurt. Either way, here's what I can tell you. Own your mistakes. Don't hide from what you've done. You might think it'll be easier to pretend it didn't happen, or that the other person won't notice. But trust me, that only makes things worse. The guilt will suffocate you. If you've messed up, own it. Tell the truth, no matter how painful. It's the only way to begin healing. Confessing isn't about blaming yourself endlessly, it's about breaking free from the lie. Prepare for the consequences. I won't lie to you, It's not going to be easy. You can't expect everything to go back to normal. Even if your partner forgives you, the trust is shattered, and that's going to take time to rebuild. You might lose things you never expected, and that's something you need to face head-on. But at least you'll know you did the right thing. You took responsibility, and that's something to hold on to. Don't expect immediate forgiveness. It might hurt, but forgiveness isn't a switch that gets flipped. When I told him the truth, he didn't immediately forgive me. He didn't say everything was okay, but he told me we could work through it. That was the hardest part. He wasn't offering an easy way out. He was offering something far more difficult, a chance to rebuild what we had, if we both committed to it. Forgiveness takes time. You can't rush it. But if you're willing to fight for it, it might come. And if you're the one who's been hurt, it's okay to take your time. Trust doesn't return overnight, but if both people are committed, it can be rebuilt piece by piece. Be honest, even when it hurts. The hardest conversations are often the most necessary ones. You need to be honest with each other about everything, why it happened, what was missing, what needs to change. Avoiding the truth only leaves the wounds open. And sometimes, the truth might be uncomfortable, even painful. But facing it is the only way to move forward. Work on yourself. After everything, the most important thing I learned was that the relationship couldn't heal unless I healed first. The emptiness I felt wasn't just about my husband or our marriage, it was about me. I had to look at myself honestly and understand why I had made the choices I did. The emotional affair wasn't just about a lack of attention or excitement, it was about me not feeling seen. I hadn't been paying attention to what I needed, what I was missing. Take the time to work on yourself. You can't be part of a healthy relationship unless you are whole on your own. Healing, growth, and change come from within. Don't expect your partner to fix everything for you. Give each other time and space. Healing takes time. It's not a one-time apology, and it's not a quick fix. It's a slow and steady process that requires patience from both sides. Let your partner process their emotions in their own time, and don't rush the healing process. We're all human, and sometimes, we need space to grieve what's been lost before we can rebuild. If you're the one who's been hurt, take the time you need. If you're the one who's betrayed, be there, but don't force forgiveness or rush the process. Respect each other's feelings. Believe in the possibility of rebuilding. In the end, what kept me going was believing in the possibility of rebuilding. We had something beautiful before. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I believed we could find our way back to each other. And we have. It's not perfect, and it's not always easy, but every day is a step toward healing, toward regaining trust.